If you enjoy the stories, please subscribe, like and comment. Thank you. Sam Colt and Detective Murphy in The Elusive Farter and the Golden Serpent by the Twisted Jester. Chapter 1, The Mysterious Farts. The grand mansion stood imposingly against the darkened sky as the guests arrived, dressed in their finest attire for the exclusive gathering. Laughter and chatter filled the air as the esteemed attendees mingled, savoring the anticipation of an evening filled with elegance and sophistication. Among the guests, a man named Mr. Jonathan Hartwell ventured into a dimly lit room, seeking a momentary breather from the lively festivities. As he stepped cautiously into the room, the lights suddenly flickered and vanished, plunging him into complete darkness. Startled, Mr. Hartwell stumbled backward, his hand brushing against a nearby wall.
"Oh my, I suppose the light bulb blew out,"
he muttered to himself, trying to make sense of the sudden darkness. As his eyes strained to adjust, a peculiar movement caught his attention. He peered into the black void, his heart pounding with a feeling of unease.
"Someone there!"
Mr. Hartwell called out, his voice echoing into the darkness. Silence enveloped the room, leaving him with only his own racing thoughts. Then, out of nowhere, a sound reverberated through the stillness. Mr. Hartwell wrinkled his nose, repulsed by the unexpected intrusion of such an unpleasant scent. As the stench invaded his senses, his body recoiled, causing him to lose his balance. With a resounding thud, he crumpled to the floor, succumbing to the overpowering smell that had rendered him unconscious. Unaware of the events unfolding within the room, the other guests continued to revel in the splendor of the mansion. It was only a matter of time before the absence of Mr. Hartwell was noticed by the observant and inquisitive among them. A concerned woman, Mrs. Beatrice Sinclair, recognized the man's absence and raised the alarm.
"Has anyone seen Mr. Hartwell?"
she asked, her voice filled with worry. A small group of guests, including Mrs. Sinclair, ventured forth to investigate his whereabouts, their apprehension growing with each passing moment. They arrived at the room where Mr. Hartwell had disappeared, the door slightly ajar. Peering inside, they discovered him, staggering and clutching the wall for support. His complexion was pale, and beads of perspiration dotted his forehead. Concerned, they hurried to his side, supporting him and offering words of comfort.
"Are you all right, Mr. Hartwell?"
Mr. Hartwell shook his head weakly, struggling to find his voice.
"I don't know what happened.
He managed to say, his words laced with confusion.
The lights went out, and then, a grotesque sound. That's all I remember."
An air of unease settled over the group as they exchanged puzzled glances. Something peculiar was afoot, and it was evident that they needed outside assistance to unravel the bizarre mystery that had befallen them. It was then that Mrs. Sinclair, her brow furrowed with concern, suggested the idea that would ultimately shape the course of events.
"We need the best detectives in the city. We must summon Sam Colt and Detective Murphy."
With a unanimous agreement, the decision was made to contact the renowned detectives, known for their unmatched skills in solving the most perplexing cases. The call was placed, and Sam Colt and Detective Murphy answered, their voices brimming with determination and resolve. Chapter 2, A Gathering of Secrets. The storm outside intensified as Sam Colt and Detective Murphy arrived at the grand mansion, their presence welcomed by the anxious hosts and perplexed guests. Dressed in their signature detective attire, they exuded an air of confidence and determination. Introductions ensued as the detectives acquainted themselves with the esteemed guests, committing each name and face to memory. The atmosphere in the mansion was one of anticipation and unease, as if secrets lingered beneath the lavish facade. In a private room, away from prying eyes, Sam Colt and Detective Murphy met with Mrs. Beatrice Sinclair, the woman who had raised the alarm when Mr. Hartwell went missing. Her voice trembled with concern as she recounted the unsettling incident.
"Mr. Hartwell appeared disoriented, as if something had taken a toll on him. He mentioned that the lights suddenly went out before he heard a grotesque sound, unlike anything he had ever encountered before."
The detectives exchanged knowing glances, recognizing that this was no ordinary case. The puzzle pieces were coming together, hinting at a deliberate scheme that demanded their attention. Just as they began contemplating their next move, a sudden thunderclap shook the mansion, causing a collective gasp to echo through the room. The lights flickered and then extinguished, plunging them into darkness once more. Amidst the tension, a sound emerged from the darkness, followed by the unmistakable thud of someone collapsing onto the floor. Anxiety surged through the room as the smell of the foul emission wafted through the air, forcing many to retreat, gagging and covering their noses. With the lights restored, the guests hurriedly gathered their fallen companions and carried them to a safe location, their concern growing with each occurrence. It became evident that the elusive farter's intentions extended beyond mere pranks or discomfort, amplifying the urgency of Sam Colt and Detective Murphy's investigation. Just then, Mr. Harrington, the host, entered the room with a concerned expression on his face.
Gentlemen, I must confide in you. There is something of great value hidden within these walls. A priceless artifact known as the Golden Serpent.
Sam Colt and Detective Murphy exchanged a quick glance, their curiosity piqued.
Please continue,
Sam Colt urged, his tone steady. Mr. Harrington took a deep breath, composing himself.
The Golden Serpent has been in our family for generations. It is said to possess mystical powers and is worth a fortune. We have taken great measures to keep it concealed from the world, but recently I've begun to suspect that someone within our circle may have discovered its existence.
Detective Murphy leaned forward, his eyes narrowing.
You believe the mysterious events? The farts are somehow connected to the Golden Serpent?
Mr. Harrington nodded gravely.
Yes, I fear that someone may be using these disturbances as a diversion, aiming to exploit the chaos and make off with the Golden Serpent.
Silence settled over the room as the gravity of the situation sank in. Sam Colt and Detective Murphy now understood the true nature of the mystery that had unfolded before them. It was no longer just about strange farts, it was about protecting a priceless artifact from falling into the wrong hands. With renewed determination, Sam Colt addressed the gathered guests, relaying the newfound information about the Golden Serpent and its potential connection to the ongoing events. The room filled with a mix of apprehension and resolve as everyone realized the stakes at hand. As the storm raged on outside, the detectives, accompanied by Dr. Parker, delved deeper into the mystery. Their focus had shifted from solving a peculiar phenomenon to unraveling a web of secrets and protecting the Golden Serpent from an unknown threat. Together, they formed a formidable team, combining their unique skills to uncover the truth behind the elusive farter and the Golden Serpent heist. The mansion, a haven of abundance and luxury, had transformed into a maze of uncertainty and danger. Yet, the detectives were undeterred, ready to face the challenges that lay ahead, in their relentless pursuit of justice and the preservation of the priceless treasure hidden within the grand estate. Chapter 3: Secrets of the Brotherhood. The grand dining room buzzed with anticipation as Sam Colt and Detective Murphy prepared to address the gathered guests. Their eyes scanned the room, taking note of the shifting expressions and the undercurrent of tension that filled the air. They knew that within this room lay the answers they sought, the truth behind the elusive farter and the Golden Serpent heist. Stepping forward, Sam Colt's voice resonated with authority.
Ladies and gentlemen, the time has come to shed light on the shadows of betrayal and unveil the identity of the elusive farter,
he declared, his gaze sweeping across the room. A hush fell over the assembly as all eyes turned to the detectives, eager for the revelation. Detective Murphy joined Sam Colt, the two of them projecting an aura of unwavering determination.
Our investigation has led us to a trail of clues, linking the elusive farter to the theft of the Golden Serpent.
Detective Murphy began, his voice steady.
However, it has become apparent that this is no ordinary prank or act of mischief. It's a calculated scheme, a web of deception crafted to achieve a diabolical objective.
Gasps and murmurs filled the room as the guests absorbed the gravity of the situation. The implications of the elusive farter's actions were far more significant than they had initially realized. Sam Colt continued, his voice resolute.
We have discovered a unique calling card left behind by the elusive farter. A pair of skid mark underwear.
He revealed, holding up the evidence for all to see.
These skid marks are not random. They are deliberate, a gruesome signature that leads us closer to the truth.
Whispers of shock and disbelief reverberated through the room as the guests absorbed the revelation. The connection between the elusive Farter's pranks and the Golden Serpent heist grew clearer, unveiling a motive that reached far beyond the realm of crude jokes. Dr. Isabella Parker, the scientist from the mansion's laboratory, stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with curiosity and expertise.
With the assistance of our team, we conducted a thorough search of the mansion and its surroundings. In a hidden compartment within Mrs. Caldwell's quarters, we discovered the incriminating evidence: the skid-marked underwear.
A murmur of astonishment swept through the room as the guests processed the revelation. The evidence pointed directly at Mrs. Caldwell, casting a shadow of doubt upon her innocence. Sam Colt fixed his gaze on Mrs. Caldwell, his voice firm.
Mrs. Elizabeth Caldwell, you stand accused of using your flatulence as a smokescreen to distract and deceive while carrying out the heist of the Golden Serpent,
he declared. Mrs. Caldwell's face blanched, her eyes darting nervously around the room. The weight of the evidence against her was undeniable, and the realization of her betrayal sank in. Detective Murphy stepped forward, his tone measured.
Your proximity to the stolen serpent, your reactions to the skid marks, and the meticulous planning behind your actions have exposed your true nature.
The room fell into a heavy silence, the tension palpable. All eyes were fixed upon Mrs. Caldwell, waiting for her response, for an explanation that might mitigate her guilt. With a trembling voice, Mrs. Caldwell finally spoke.
I admit to my involvement.
She confessed, her gaze filled with remorse.
But there's more to the story. I am part of an ancient organization known as the Brotherhood of the Serpent.
The room fell into a hushed silence once more, all eyes fixed on Mrs. Caldwell with a mixture of surprise and curiosity. The mention of the Brotherhood added an air of mystery and intrigue to the unfolding drama.
The Brotherhood has protected the Golden Serpent for generations. Our ancestors were skilled in the art of manipulating gas. They discovered that by controlling the release and direction of flatulence, they could create potent distractions and protect the Golden Serpent from potential thieves.
Sam Colt and Detective Murphy exchanged intrigued glances, beginning to see the method behind the madness. The elusive Farter's actions were no longer mere pranks, they were a well-orchestrated defense designed to protect the Golden Serpent from intruders.
Over time, the Brotherhood refined the technique. They developed ways to make the emissions more potent, incapacitating anyone who might threaten the Serpent's safety.
Dr. Isabella Parker chimed in, adding her scientific perspective.
The composition of the gases produced and their precise timing can indeed lead to a stench so foul that it can cause temporary disorientation and even unconsciousness.
Mrs. Caldwell's eyes filled with a mix of pride and regret.
I was chosen to be part of the Brotherhood and undergo rigorous training. It's a long tradition in our family. The Serpent's protection is our sacred duty. And the power we have been given comes at a price. The mark of the skid-marked underwear.
Detective Murphy nodded, understanding the weight of tradition and the gravity of Mrs. Caldwell's situation.
You were entrusted with great power, but you allowed it to be tainted by personal gain.
He said, his voice firm yet sympathetic. Mrs. Caldwell sighed, the burden of her actions evident.
I never intended for things to go this far. I just wanted to protect the Golden Serpent and ensure its safety.
Sam Colt stepped forward, his eyes searching hers.
We believe you, Mrs. Caldwell, but it's time to make amends. Help us retrieve the stolen artifact and expose the rogue members of the Brotherhood. Together, we can ensure that its power is safeguarded for the right reasons.
He urged. The guests observed the unfolding scene, sensing the complexity of the situation. The mansion, once a place of celebration, now stood as a battleground of secrets and betrayal. But amidst the darkness, a glimmer of hope remained, the possibility of redemption and the restoration of ancient traditions for a nobler cause. Mrs. Caldwell nodded, determination in her eyes.
You're right. I will help you, and I will accept whatever consequences come my way. It's time to set things right.
With newfound unity and determination, the detectives and Mrs. Caldwell prepared to face the unknown adversaries and navigate the labyrinth of intrigue that lay before them. In their relentless pursuit of justice and the preservation of the priceless treasure hidden within the grand estate, they would uncover secrets that had been buried for centuries and confront the true power of the Brotherhood of the Serpent. Chapter 4: Shadows of the Brotherhood. The moon hung high in the night sky, casting an ethereal glow over the grand estate as Sam Colt, Detective Murphy, and Mrs. Caldwell ventured into the depths of the mansion. Their steps were hushed, the air thick with anticipation as they followed a trail of clues that might lead them to the stolen golden serpent. As they descended a spiraling staircase, Mrs. Caldwell's voice broke the silence.
The Brotherhood's lair is hidden beneath the mansion. It has been a well-kept secret, accessible only to those initiated into our ranks.
Detective Murphy glanced at Mrs. Caldwell.
And you're willing to lead us there?
She nodded resolutely.
I must make amends for my actions. The Golden Serpent is not just a powerful artifact, it is the embodiment of our legacy, and its safekeeping is my responsibility.
With their lanterns casting flickering shadows on the walls, they arrived at a seemingly ordinary bookshelf. Mrs. Caldwell pressed a hidden lever, and the bookshelf swung open, revealing a hidden passage. The detectives exchanged glances, appreciating the intricacy of the Brotherhood's concealment. The secret passage led them through a labyrinth of narrow tunnels until they reached an underground chamber. Dim torchlight illuminated the vast space adorned with ancient artifacts and symbols. At its center lay a pedestal, and atop it rested the golden serpent, gleaming with a mesmerizing aura.
The Brotherhood believes that the serpent's power comes from within, that its true essence resides in its heart.
Mrs. Caldwell explained, her voice echoing through the chamber. Sam Colt approached the pedestal, his curiosity piqued.
It's heart? But it's just a statue,
he said, puzzled. Mrs. Caldwell smiled knowingly.
Appearances can be deceiving. Touch the serpent's heart, and you will understand.
Curiosity overcoming caution, Sam Colt reached out and touched the heart-shaped symbol on the serpent's chest. As his hand made contact, an electric surge coursed through him, and he felt a profound connection, a bond with an ancient power that transcended time. Detective Murphy watched, amazed, as Sam Colt's eyes widened with revelation.
I can feel it. It's as if the serpent is alive, its essence coursing through me.
Mrs. Caldwell nodded, her eyes filled with a mix of pride and humility.
You are now connected to the serpent, to the source of our power. But remember, this power must be wielded responsibly and for the greater good.
Their moment of wonderment was interrupted by a distant sound, faint but ominous, a low rumble that vibrated through the chamber. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and dust fell from the ceiling as if the very earth were awakening. A look of concern crossed Mrs. Caldwell's face.
We must hurry,
she urged.
The Brotherhood has defenses in place to protect the serpent from intruders.
Following Mrs. Caldwell's lead, they continued through the underground chamber, navigating traps and hidden mechanisms with the serpent's power guiding their way. But as they approached the exit, they found themselves face to face with a group of hooded figures, the rogue members of the Brotherhood.
You have trespassed where you don't belong.
The figure at the forefront sneered, his voice echoing through the chamber. Mrs. Caldwell stepped forward, her resolve unwavering.
The serpent's power is not meant to be used for selfish gains or malevolence,
she declared.
You have betrayed the true purpose of the Brotherhood.
The rogue members laughed darkly.
We are the true heirs of the Brotherhood. We seek the serpent's power to dominate and control,
the leader proclaimed. Sam Colt and Detective Murphy stood at Mrs. Caldwell's side, ready to defend the sacred artifact and put an end to the rogue Brotherhood's misuse of its power. The serpent's energy flowed through them, a force that strengthened their resolve and united them as a formidable team. With a swift, synchronized movement, they launched into action, each using the serpent's power to thwart the rogue members. Mrs. Caldwell skillfully directed her controlled flatulence, creating a potent distraction that incapacitated several of the adversaries. Meanwhile, Sam, Colt and Detective Murphy utilized their newfound connection to the Serpent's essence, their moves guided by an otherworldly intuition. The clash between the two factions was intense, but the rogues were no match for the combined strength and purpose of Sam, Colt, Detective Murphy, and Mrs. Caldwell. One by one, the rogue members were disarmed and subdued, their malevolent ambitions thwarted. As the last of the hooded figures fell to the ground, defeated and disheartened, Mrs. Caldwell approached them, her expression a mix of pity and resolve.
The power you seek is not true power. It's merely a shadow of the Serpent's essence, one that corrupts and consumes. You have lost sight of the Brotherhood's true purpose.
With the rogue members apprehended, Sam, Colt retrieved the stolen golden serpent from where it had been concealed. The artifact felt alive in his hands, resonating with the ancient power that now coursed through him.
We will ensure that the Brotherhood's traditions are upheld, but not at the cost of others.
Mrs. Caldwell proclaimed.
The Serpent's power will be safeguarded for generations to come, as it was meant to be.
With the golden serpent back in safe hands and the rogue members defeated, Sam, Colt, Detective Murphy, and Mrs. Caldwell emerged from the underground chamber, bathed in the moonlight's glow. The mansion, once filled with secrets and shadows, now stood as a place of renewed purpose and understanding. The journey had been arduous, and the revelations profound, but the bond between the detectives and Mrs. Caldwell had grown stronger. With the power of the serpent guiding them, they were prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead in their pursuit of justice and the preservation of the ancient legacy of the Brotherhood of the Serpent.